what's been just really interesting to see over and over again is that it's almost always the case that whatever makes you your most incredible, successful, amazing self is also the thing that is hugely problematic in your life.
Dr. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited to talk to you. And my first and most important question is, how are you doing? Like, actually, for real, how are you doing?
For real, I am such a mix of things. I feel like one of my big lessons through my own therapy and through studying therapy and just into adulthood has been allowing myself to be seemingly contradictory feelings at the same time. And so I feel really grateful and excited. You know, my book is out. I've been working so hard to make that happen, feeling great about that. Wonderful community and opportunity. I also feel tired and like nervous about the world and, overwhelmed and all of that. So that's all existing together for me.
It's actually so interesting that you say that, because I've been feeling this like dichotomy of trying to figure out mutual emotions for like the past year, basically, and I'll tell you why. I lost my sister in 2018, and her birthday actually was yesterday.
Anniversary reactions are real.
Yeah, celebratory birthday for her. I have only beautiful memories of her, and it's almost been 7 years since she passed away. But my point being is that last September I got married, and this September we're having a child. And so both of those things are so fucking exciting. But at the same time, I'm like, damn, my sister would have absolutely she was like major party, loved to dance, always big smile, would have loved the party we had. She was like she loved spending time with family, like was super, super important to her. And like, weddings and funerals are like the only time that everyone shows up, and which is, I think, not a good thing. And we should fix that. But, that's maybe a battle to cross another time. And then but you get sad. So I was happy, sad, excited at the same time. And then, I'm having a child, and like, man, my sister would have been such a good aunt and like all these amazing things. But at the same time, my wife and I are fucking super pumped and like, holy cow, it's gonna be amazing. And my parents are pumped. They live down the street. And so it's interesting that you say that, because I've just been like sort of battling with both of these emotions and trying to just let myself say, like, it's all good, dude. You can feel mutual emotions. It's a cool thing to experience, that you're like really excited and also like, a little bit sad, or maybe that's not the right word. Like, I don't know, disappointed potentially. Maybe that's a better one. Like disappointed that you won't be there. But anyways, not to, dive super deep into my personal life.
I'm so with you. Like, no two feelings are mutually exclusive. I think that we forget that. And you're not betraying your grief by feeling joy. Just hearing you describe it as a battle, like there's only room for one and they're all fighting for space. And I've really learned to sort of expand the space and say, you're all welcome here, and I'll sit with each of you and all of you at the same time, and we all belong.
Yeah, it still is a bit of a battle. Maybe I should use a different word to just allow space for all of it. But that at times seems heavy, so we want to sort of avoid that. But then you learn that you want to lean into that as sort of the only way to figure it out, and all that stuff. But whatever. So yeah, anyways, I didn't know we were going to start there, but that was cool. I appreciate that. But I also been thinking a lot about, since like being in this space of mental health over the last 7 years, because of my sister and her story and that journey, and jumping into this podcast, I think I've been seeing a lot of mental health and tech, and now you're a co-founder of one of those types of companies, but you are trying to do it with some deep integrity. How do you feel about the space overall, with sort of like trying to automatize this really special relationship between like therapy, support, a person trying to figure out their life, and all these sorts of things?
I'm very wary of it. And, obviously I have a particular point of view. Someone who has dedicated their life to something is going to feel a little defensive against the idea that it could just be so easily replaced. But I have sort of a yes and mentality about it. I see the role of technology and AI in our general mental and emotional health. I think there is something powerful about having a low barrier to access of, suggestions for how you can work on yourself and a place to process through things. But I have a very deeply held belief that the true mechanism of change, the true mechanism of healing in therapy, is the relationship itself. the relationship that you build with your therapist becomes this microcosm for all of the relationships in your life. And the care that your therapist genuinely has for you becomes this really powerful and healing thing and allows you to do things that you might not have been able to do before. And I just don't think that we're going to be able to heal our relationships out in the world through a fabricated relationship with technology. In fact, I think so many of our relationships are being replaced by technology now, and it's leaving us feeling lonelier than ever. That, if anything, I think one of the beautiful things about therapy is that it is this real person who sees you from this authentic place. And I just don't think that's, I don't know, I don't think that's replaceable. I think a little bit about, imagine you were in love with someone and you wanted them to be in love with you. And Cupid came down and was like, okay, well, I can shoot them with my arrow and they'll fall in love with you. And so they do that and the person falls in love with you. And in the back of your mind, you always know this person doesn't actually love you. They were just programmed to love you. And that just wouldn't be what you're really looking for. And that's how I feel about an AI therapist. Like, yes, it's been programmed to empathize with you, but it's not actually empathizing with you. And that's what we really need is care and love and empathy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think about falling in love with my wife. Like that was one of the best parts, like getting to know her and discover herself and discover me. If I just like met her and then the next day she was like, we're good. I'm in love. Like it's done deal. Someone told me this was good. I think it would feel less special. The sort of foundation that we
Definitely.
build our love on would be less robust, maybe. But I also think about that in regards to young men. I think about young men a lot, and that's exactly what's happening to them. Not in a therapy sense, but in this like sort of AI virtual girlfriend porn sense. They're basically being sedated to think that they don't need to go out into the real world and do anything
Right.
because they can get everything they want behind a screen. They can make money behind a screen through like selling crypto or whatever the new thing is, and they can get a girlfriend. They can have these chat boxes tell them how cute they are, and they can watch porn online. And like, no way is that productive for anyone in society, and it's not. It's not good for just the well-being, the state of men, how they feel about themselves, how they feel about the world, specifically how they feel about women, and those important things that are just we see coming up on social media quite a bit.
I couldn't agree more. There's already so much societal pressure to dehumanize women in that way. And yeah, I mean, I think about the technological advances of like VR porn, for example, and that pretty soon, men are going to have to decide between being vulnerable and getting rejected sometimes and feeling like they're not good enough and all the normal human things that come about with dating, or to get rid of all of that and have this faux version of relationships and sex. And I can understand why that would be tempting, but we've seen that the lonelier men are, the more dangerous they become. So I'm really with you that I think we need to rage against the dying of the light, I think we really have to fight for our humanity.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like for me, I look back like a motivating factor for me to get my shit together, like to shower, to work out, to like be able to hold a conversation was specifically so I could try and get laid. And I know that's
Right.
not like this like grand thing, but like then it turns to something different. Then you start to have confidence in yourself, you start to find some purpose, you start to get interested in things, but you need some sort of activation energy. You need some sort of thing to get
Right.
you off your ass, and then it can transition into something real and purposeful and meaningful. But there's no need for that to happen again. So what's the motivating factor? Hopefully, we can prop up, better role models on social that express a better vision for masculinity, that talk about things that are important of being, responsible and taking ownership for your life and trying to be kind and compassionate, but also, being someone who can provide and protect and have these sort of, traditional, healthy, integrated masculine values. But I don't know where that's coming from because, you can't like direct where a 13-year-old boy will land his attention on. That's very, very challenging.
Yeah.
And some of these guys who have a terrible message are really charismatic. And of course they would be drawn to that energy, but they don't have the discernment to say like this is not the right way unless they have like a strong father in the house or they have a coach who they already look up to who's like told them the direction of that. These are very complicated things for young people to sort out as they're just like trying to develop. They want to fit in. They don't know their sense of belonging yet. It's really hard stuff.
Our brain just didn't evolve for it either. Our brain was not meant to take in this kind of information at this kind of speed. And, obviously I study psychology and all of the complications of it. And one of the things that they're showing is, for example, 18-year-old boys are now having trouble, like, getting it up for 18-year-old girls because the porn they've been watching for 5 to 8 years is so extreme and so intense, and their brain has wired around needing such a high level of stimulation to feel, erotically charged, essentially, that regular sex that 20 years ago would have excited any 18-year-old boy is suddenly not enough. And so we're literally messing up our brains here by inputting this kind of technology all the time.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and sad, I think.
And really sad. Man.
Yeah.
Damn. Anyways, since it's May, it is Mental Health Awareness Month. When we are recording this, we'll come out in June, and hopefully we still think about mental health in June. So that's why it's coming out in June. But do you have any overall thoughts and opinions on these sorts of months, specifically like a Mental Health Awareness Month?
I have mixed feelings about the whole X Awareness Month situation. I think it's a good thing for us to be reminded that we should put our attention in places, but isn't mental health important all the time, But sure, if May is a time that people look toward it a little bit more, I'm here for that. And I guess I would say, just like we sometimes see January 1st as this motivation to start better habits and taking better care of ourselves, maybe we can see May as a jumping off point to prioritize our mental health that we hopefully keep going all year long.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been making a plea to rebrand Mental Health Awareness Month to Mental Health Action Month. Because I think it falls in line with what you're talking about with your emotional fitness and the 7 traits of your emotional fitness in your book, Flex Your Feelings. It's like, it's got to be about a certain set of protocols and tools that we do. Obviously, awareness is important. That's step number 1 in your traits. We need to have that awareness. But I think people are aware of mental health. Now, of course, there's going to be certain sects and cultures and there where it's still stigmatized and not talked about, and we avoid it and all those sorts of things. But I do think the awareness piece is obviously very important. But I do think that what's going to move the needle forward is always going to be a set of action. And I also think that if we make mental health, like you're trying to do, like a little bit more sexier, even though that's like a weird word to describe mental health, like people will buy into the fact that it's supposed to be an additive to your life. It's right. Going to allow you to try and flourish to the best of your ability, because there's so many things that are uncertain, and it's hard to find meaning in this life, and it's hard to find relationships and purpose. And maybe we can have a set of practices and tools that allow us to maybe better handle that. Maybe. No guarantees, of course, but maybe.
Yeah, I think about with physical fitness, the message is not, you're sick, there's so much wrong with you, come work out. It's, hey, like, you're doing pretty good, but you could be doing so much better. Don't you want to get stronger? Don't you want to look better? Don't you want to live longer? Don't you want to feel better? Come work out. And that's what I'm trying to help people understand is also true with mental health. Nothing has to be wrong with you. You don't have to be broken. You don't have to be in crisis. You don't need to be trying to fix anything. You can just level up the relationship that you have to yourself and to other people. You can just become emotionally fit and just become more satisfied with your life and have healthier relationships and be more appealing to the people that you want to appeal to. You just have to be willing to get a little uncomfortable and do your reps and do the work and make it an ongoing part of your daily life.
Amen. Stamp to that. I think that's where sports, I think they got it right? They finally involved like sports psychologists and mental performance coaches, only under the guise of this is just going to help you perform better. And that's really the way to get to athletes, right? I'm sure it's the same way to get to entrepreneurs. How do I level up? How do I perform better? How do I be more productive? Well, if you do these things, is also if you sleep a little bit more, this might help you too. And I think that regard of like young kids seeing athletes meditate on the side, or talking about their mental skills, or talking about their breath, or how they handle mistakes, or the idea of failure, all these sorts of things potentially could translate into, an everyday person having a set of tools, taking some emotional fitness classes, like using it as a proactive tool to just try and be the best version they can be.
100%. That's what we're going for. Although I will throw out there that my goal is not to make everyone as productive as possible. That's already what society is telling us to do. My goal is to have people feel as authentically satisfied with their life as possible, whatever that might mean.
Yeah. What have you seen on a good side and maybe on a not so good side in terms of the people you work with who are high performers? Like, what do they have in them that makes them high performers? Or also, what do you think that maybe they need to address that is potentially not so good for them.
You know what's been just really interesting to see over and over again is that it's almost always the case that whatever makes you your most incredible, successful, amazing self is also the thing that is hugely problematic in your life. That our strengths and our weaknesses are just almost always opposite sides of the same coin in one way or another. And this is often true with entrepreneurs. You know, I compare entrepreneurs to Olympian athletes. You're running the equivalent of a marathon every single day, except you're using your mind instead of your body. And, you know, an athlete wouldn't eat fast food every day and think that they could still do their best, their best work. And similarly, no athlete reached their full potential without a coach at some point. So why would we think that we can reach our emotional potential without support in that area? So yeah, it's always funny to see that, you know, for example, I'll give you an example. To be a really successful CEO, you probably have to be a little bit narcissistic. And that is because you are essentially believing in something that doesn't exist yet. And you are believing yourself to be the first and only person capable of bringing this thing into existence. And you have to just like believe the shit out of yourself to think that you can do this. And so that's a positive trait in a CEO or a founder. But that can turn on you really quickly if you don't feel like, as people come into your idea, that you're willing to listen to them and take feedback and, you know, face it when something's not working or when people are unhappy with you or whatever it might be. So a lot of my work is really just helping people figure out what the inflection point is when something is no longer helping you and when it's now getting in your way.
Yeah, very similar to athletes. It's like you talk to most athletes to get to like a really high level, and what motivated them was the thing they're running away from. The third grade teacher who said they're not shit, right? And then they reach a certain threshold, and some person comes around. Like I love Dr. Michael Gervais. He's like a sports psychologist, sort of obsessed with his work. And he's like, someone gets to a certain threshold and they meet me, and they feel like if they change the way they're doing it, if they're running maybe towards something instead of running away from something, that they're going to lose that edge. Well, like after the game, I worked out for another 3 hours. That's my edge, doctor. I can't change that. What if someone's going to take my spot? Then I'm going to lose my job. Then I'm not going to have any money. And then I can't feed my family. And then I can't build this generational wealth for everyone that came after me. And like, what am I supposed to do? I can't. And then you start to just someone sort of edge it. It breaks away like an onion a little bit. And you learn there's a different way that's still going to keep your edge, that maybe after the game you should maybe get 8 hours of sleep and then you can work out in the morning. I think you can get the same thing done, but your body's allowed to rest. And so I've had the same thing because I've been an athlete my whole life. I'm like, I can just work, 16-hour days every single day. Everything will be fine. No big deal. And then it's like your body just shuts down at some point. You get sick, like you can't work, your brain starts to be foggy, and I can't remember shit when I'm talking to someone on a podcast. I'm like, why? I've just been working. And it's like there's got to be a different way to approach high performance that's actually sustainable and durable over the long run.
100%. I mean, all right, I know sports is really your center of gravity in your life. So the sports figure that I have the closest relationship with through all this is Kevin Love, who's an investor in my company. And, we've done events together. He's been on my podcast, and he is this voice of exactly what you're talking about, that, yeah, he had this, internal drive that moved him to be the best, to want to work really hard and be better than everyone and all of that. But it, crescendoed into this terrifying panic attack on the court where it just felt like more than he could possibly handle. And he realized, oh shit, I actually have to tend to my mental health in a regular way, just like I tend to my body as an athlete in a regular way. And so I hope people will understand that your mental health is the best investment you can make into yourself as a person. Every moment and every ounce of energy you put into bettering yourself in this way will pay off tenfold. Like, healthy humans, healthy returns, and our mental health is so important for that.
Yeah. Shout out to Kevin Love. What a guy.
He's a good
Love
one.
him.
He's a gem.
Yeah. Is he great? Is he awesome? Seems like he seems to be
incredible.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel lucky just to know him.
That's beautiful. Before we jump into more of your book and sort of the details behind that, what would you say are some of the misconceptions about talk therapy and why some people still have some hesitations behind, speaking to a therapist?
Yeah, man. Therapy is still so stigmatized, and I think it just has a really bad rap. A lot of people think therapy is something you do when you're really suffering, really struggling, or when you have a mental health disorder. And don't get me wrong, those are great times to go to therapy. That's certainly one of the things that it's there for. But I think a lot of people wait until shit really hits the fan to go get this kind of support. And to me, that's like waiting until you have early signs of heart disease to do cardio. Like therapy is something that you should do when everything's mostly fine, because if you go when you're in crisis, then what you're doing is managing a crisis. When you go when everything's fine, you are doing a deeper, more proactive type of work that is strengthening you and is going to prevent issues down the line. So just like you shouldn't wait till you have the flu to go to the gym, you should go to the gym now, and you're going to boost your immune system and you might be less likely to get the flu later. Similarly, go to therapy now, build a relationship with this person, learn about yourself, identify your patterns, figure out what you could be doing to get out of your own way in life a little bit. And then when life does inevitably throw shit at you, which it will, not only will you have built up these tools and these muscles to handle those things, but you will also have developed a relationship with someone who knows you and can help support you through those tough things. So, like, the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me happened when I was 22, and I had already been in therapy for 2 years, and I was so grateful that I already had that relationship going when I went through my hard thing, and that I had already developed a really strong sense of myself and how I cope with hard things and what I would need in those moments and, all of that. So, really, like, I know therapy is tough to access, it's expensive, it takes time, but it is such an incredible investment. Everything good in my life is a result of the therapy I've done. I really recommend that people give it a try.
Yeah. I am a big proponent of therapy. Also, what changed my life after my sister passed away was group therapy. I attended for a while, like suicide loss survivor groups, because I just felt like, that's a very unique way to lose a sibling.
Yeah.
And people can connect with you, and they can feel for you, they can have empathy, but they don't truly, understand, right? I don't want anyone to understand. I hope everyone has to understand that ever again in our whole life. But you walk into a room where people have lost their sibling 2 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 12 years ago, a month ago, and it's like this is like an instant connection and a vibe. Like they just understand you, and you listen to these people who are 12 years out of their journey, and they still feel something, but they have this wisdom about them that like you haven't seen. And there was like a really hard emotion that I was like avoiding for a long time about my sister, and this person was expressing these things about how they had to go through that, and I was like, oh, that's fucking me, that's me. And just because I had that mirror of a person who knew exactly what I was feeling, I was then also able to dig a little deeper in myself, talk to them about it, share with the group, have people supporting me, and like it's such a beautiful experience. I mean, that's just the power of relationship. That's really all it is.
Yeah, and one of the biggest tricks our mind plays on us, especially when we're in a tough place, is that we are alone in something. We are so good at convincing ourselves that we're the only person who's ever really experienced or felt a thing. And there's something so profound about realizing that other people understand and have felt a tough thing as well. So community support is everything.
Yeah. Maybe we can, I don't know if we can give a full nod to social media for, I guess, sort of doing that. If you go online, you can hear people talk about them being not alone, but then you get into sort of Dr. TikTok, and now he's diagnosing you with severe attachment theory times something, something, something. And
For sure. I mean, I think of social media as like the fast food of connection. Like, it's better than nothing. If I were starving somewhere, I would rather have Taco Bell than nothing, for sure. But if all I were to eat for the next 40 years of my life was Taco Bell, it would cause some real problems in my body that I would like to avoid. So, sure, social media is great. It's better than being connected to no one. But it does not replace real connection, and we should be prioritizing real-life connection as well.
yeah, I think we're going to realize that only maybe if we're going to get a little bit deeper into this sort of AI thing, and then we're going to realize that life was just a little bit better when we had real human contact with real humans that we loved, and not just like sort of this pretend thing that it might lead to.
Yeah, I think AI therapy will be as good as regular therapy right around the time sexting is as good as actual sex. It's just different, and, I think we have to prioritize the real thing.
Yeah, I was talking to my wife because, our son's going to be born in September, and like 15 years from now, 16 years from now,
Who knows?
Like, I was like, will he even need a license? Like, will it just be only self-driving cars? Like,
Oh,
is
good
that what I'm gonna
point.
have to buy him? Like, what's gonna happen with social? Will it still be on a phone? Be like, and my wife was like, I think we're like 30 years away from that, so I think it might be still a bit normal, like 15, 16 years from now, which is probably true, but like it's still very
Hard to
interesting to
say.
think about, you know?
My brother is 8 years younger than me, and I remember at his high school graduation, the speaker said, most of you will end up in careers that don't exist yet. You will be doing something for a living that we don't even know needs to be a thing yet. The world is moving so fast, and so there's just so much we don't know. We don't know.
Yeah. Well, at least I think talking to people on the internet, or at least talking to people, will still be a job because people, I think, want that authentic connection. So maybe I'll still have a job. Who knows? Or maybe I'll have to find a new
We'll hold it
career for
down.
like for the third time in my life. I'll have to find a new career, but we'll see. Anyways, I I think about like writing a lot because I write this newsletter every week, and it's like one of the hardest things I do. And it's just like I'm not a fan of it, but I do it because I want to try and get better at it. It's sort of my athlete brain forces me to write it. What's your relationship with writing now that you're like an actual full-fledged, published, big-time author with a book out into the universe?
I don't like writing, but I like having written things. So I almost think about it like I think about working out. Like my body did not evolve to want to work out. I am not one of those people who gets a runner's high. I am not having a good time when I'm working out. But I like how I feel after I work out. And so I'm willing to do it. And that's kind of how I think about writing. I'm not always loving the moment that I'm in it. But afterwards, I look at it and I'm like, oh shit, that came out of my brain. I sat and I channeled that. And I never even thought about it that way until I wrote it down. Our thoughts sound different in our head than they do when they flow out of us. So I see it just as an investment personally. And it is something you get better at. This is one of the things that I think adults forget. You will get better at something if you do it a bunch. We know that as kids because we're learning everything. But I think we get to adulthood and we've just kind of stuck with the things we're already good at, and we're just getting better at the things we were already good at. And we forget that if you pick up an instrument or you start writing or start a new hobby and you just do it while bad at it for a while, you'll get less bad at it. And that's a nice reminder. So it's cool that you're doing that. And I'd be curious if you read your first newsletter and your latest newsletter, how different it would feel for you.
Well, I've done that with this podcast,
Uh-huh.
and that's super cool because it's still up on YouTube. I think I was just like at, I don't know, I was either like my first episode was like my parents or my mom or some of my friends. I don't even know if I had a microphone. I was like still I used to be a professional wrestler, and so like WWE, and so like I was still in like my wrestling persona character thing, so I was probably acting way out of pocket, and whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's really cool to see progress in anything, and I should do that with my newsletter. You're right, like
Yeah.
unless unless it's gotten totally worse, that I've sort of embarrassed myself over the last 280 weeks. But
I doubt
whatever.
it. You do something for 280 weeks, you're probably going to get better at it.
Probably, yeah, yeah. Why was now the right time, or at least the time to publish this book? Because you've been talking about emotional fitness for a while, at least as long as I've been following you, which has been at least 4 years. And so, what's this moment? Is this because this how it worked out with your publishing agency, or why now?
The process takes a lot longer than you think. So I wrote the proposal for this book like 3 years ago.
Okay.
So it's a long process. You write the proposal and then you shop the proposal around and then you get the deal and then it takes a year to write the book and then it takes a year to publicize the book and then the book finally comes out. So it's been a long time running, but really what was sort of the catalyzing moment was I did a talk about emotional fitness and a book agent approached me and said, you need to put your name on this term emotional fitness because people are going to start using it and you're going to want to remind people where it came from, kind of thing. And I was just starting the company at the time and I kind of set it aside and then I noticed people were starting to take up this language of emotional fitness and I thought, oh shit, I better I better write this book. And I had done this big research study about what emotional fitness is and I'd spent years sort of testing it on the people that I'd been working with and seeing it taken up by this population of relatively successful high functioning people. And I think my superpower, my specialty, is taking really overly complicated, obnoxiously jargony psychological concepts and explaining them in really digestible, actionable ways. And it felt like the world was starting to wake up to how important mental health was, but didn't necessarily have the right language or tools to know what to do with it. And so I wanted to be one small bridge in that world, and it felt like this was a good way to do that.
Yeah, that's 100% your superpower. It's the
Thanks.
reason why I followed you on Twitter again like 4 years ago. You wrote this like Twitter thread, and I was just getting into the mental health space, and you made all these ideas that I thought were super complicated, very simple, and then I talked about them, and then I followed you ever since. And so 100%, that's, I'm sure you have more superpowers, but that's definitely one of them. And
Thank
so
you for
you
reflecting
did
that back.
mention that you found emotional fitness, like, and you mentioned you sort of defined it. What does that actually mean in your eyes?
For sure. So, in my mind, emotional fitness is this ongoing proactive practice of working on your mental health and emotional intelligence, just like physical fitness is a practice that strengthens your physical health. So, I wanted to figure out, what does a more proactive approach to mental health look like? Like, what's an emotional push-up and how do you do one? How can we work on ourselves in an ongoing way? So I did this research study. It's called an interpretive phenomenological analysis, which is a fancy way of
Nice.
saying that I interviewed 100 psychologists and entrepreneurs. And I asked them the question, how would you know if you were sitting across the table from an emotionally healthy leader, an emotionally healthy person? Like, what does that look like? What does that feel like? What do those people do? What do they not do? And out of this research came these 7 traits, these 7 things that emotionally healthy people seem to work on a little bit all the time and be prioritizing as ongoing practices. And those 7 things are mindfulness, curiosity, self awareness, resilience, empathy, communication, and playfulness. And so I've essentially spent the last decade figuring out, how do we strengthen ourselves in these 7 areas? What does that look like? Where should we start? And what's the point? What the benefits are? And it's been a really cool ride. And I see that it's especially often taken up by the sports and fitness community because it makes sense. It's like, yeah, I spend hours working on my body in a proactive way so that it can not only weather the storm of what I'm putting it through, but perform at this elite level. And that's what I'm trying to help people do with their mental health.
So, what would be an example of an emotional push-up that someone could do right now, after this, before this, in the morning, something like that?
Yeah. So, and if you think about what a physical push-up is, it's just like the small physical exertion. If you've never done one before, it's going to be a little hard to do. And if you only do one, that's not going to do shit for you. But if you do them every day, not only will you be able to do more over time, but you'll get stronger in other ways too. You can pick up your groceries, you can pick up your kid. So emotional fitness is similar, where it's anything that puts you just a little out of your emotional comfort zone so that you can grow. And you have to be doing it on a regular basis. So what's an emotional push-up for me might not be an emotional push-up for you. I'm very uncomfortable with physical discomfort, for example. Like, I hate yoga because I'm just sitting there in an uncomfortable pose and my mind and body doesn't like that. Whereas I imagine you're quite comfortable with physical discomfort. On the other hand, I'm very comfortable feeling all kinds of things because of the work that I do. So for anyone listening who wants to do an emotional push-up, I would challenge you to think of one thing that makes you a little bit more uncomfortable than it seems to make other people, and then find a way to lean into that discomfort. So it might be asking for feedback. It might be apologizing for a mistake. It might be pausing before you pour yourself a drink and just sitting with what you feel instead of trying to numb it. It might be putting your phone away at the stoplight and just sitting in your boredom. Or it might be saying no when you want to say yes, but you don't really have capacity. And so whatever these things are, do them a little bit every day. And over time, you will raise the amount of discomfort that you can tolerate, and thus open the number of options you have available to you in any given moment.
Yeah, I willingly go to jujitsu so other big ass dudes can choke me out, and it's just like the best.
That sounds like my nightmare. But power to you.
But then, like I said at the beginning, like having this battle of mutual emotions, is quite challenging, for me. So, but anyways, in terms of this like discomfort or getting uncomfortable, most of us want to avoid that, especially nowadays, where like things are about convenience and easiness. And what would like maybe motivate someone or get them like past that edge of getting into that discomfort zone, knowing they're gonna be okay if they move in that zone, but it does feel quite scary, and maybe we've never moved in that place before. We're doing this by ourselves, or whatever the case may be.
Well, I would challenge people to think about, what are you doing to avoid your discomfort? And in what ways might that be more problematic and more uncomfortable for you than the original thing you're trying to avoid? You know, like if you're a person who is uncomfortable saying no, and so you say yes to everything, even though you don't have the capacity, now you're probably resentful toward people because it feels like they're taking more of you than you have to give. You're overworked, you're stressed, you're overwhelmed. And those things are probably actually more uncomfortable than just being able to take a slow breath and saying, I actually don't have capacity for that this time. You know, let me know next time. Maybe I'll be able to do it then. And so I would really just ask people to remind themselves, like, you can do hard things, and every hard thing you do now saves you 10 hard things you have to do later. Like, you either deal with your discomfort now, or it will make itself known in much worse ways later. So same with working out, right? You know, yeah, I would much rather sit on my couch and eat cake every day for sure. But 60-year-old me is like, get your ass off the couch. Like, I would like to still be able to walk around and live life and, you know, move my body. And so I am making that investment in my future self. And so think about an older version of yourself saying, hey, I know this thing is hard, but you can do it. And you are really increasing your, you know, capacity for really appreciating life if you will lean in instead of out.
But Dr. Emily, I don't have any time. I'm very busy. Sorry.
Yeah, no one has time, right? I
It's
mean,
not going to work.
your time and your priorities shrink and expand in relation to how much something matters to you. Anybody who ever says, I don't have time, just rephrase that in your head to, it's not important to me in this moment too. And if that's true, then okay, that's fine. But at least own it that that's really what's going on. You know, there isn't really time for any one thing over any other thing. And granted, this is all, like, let me caveat this. This is all within this sort of giant veil of privilege that a lot of us live in. Like, there are some people who literally have to work all day to put food on their table. And, you know, I don't want to discount that. But my experience is, the 1 hour a week you might spend in therapy, or the 10 minutes a day you might spend doing an emotional push-up, is so much less time than the ever-present pull that those emotions have on you all the time if you don't deal with them. And that you're actually losing so many hours because of the things you're not letting yourself work through. So the tough thing about emotional fitness is it's less quantifiable than physical fitness. You know, you lift 10 pounds today and 15 pounds tomorrow. You're like, oh, look, I improved. With emotional fitness, it's not quite that tangible, but you almost have to trust the process that if you do the work, life will just start to feel better. You will just be happier and more content. You'll feel more balanced and authentic. Your relationships will be healthier. So you do have to trust the process a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, like, because if I lift weights, I can see my bicep getting bigger, and that's
Right.
cool. That's nice. But with this stuff, it's in my experience, it just like randomly happens where you're like, oh shit,
Yeah, it is
like
like that.
I feel like it's like pretty good. I feel pretty good. Like, I feel clear. I feel like intentional. We talk about this a lot in the professional wrestling space because it's like really hard to put together a match, and you feel really clunky in the beginning. Everything looks like, because it's a pretend fight, and so when you're brand new, everything does look pretend. And I tell young guys who are having their first matches, like, after your first 100 matches, you're gonna have this moment in the ring where you're just like, oh, I get it now. And everything starts to slow down. You can see everything in slow motion, and you can hear the fans talk as you're moving, and it's just like, bah. And that, I feel like that's the same thing that happens when you trust the process of going to therapy, or, you know, doing the emotional push-up, or whatever the case may be. It's like, over time, you're just like, oh, cool. Yeah, all right.
You've described it so perfectly. You know, I think I've tweeted about this, that like bodybuilders really understand that there comes a moment where you just get out of your own way. And that is so much of what emotional fitness is the first part is just you learning how to even tolerate the work. And then at some point you get out of your own way and you have just all of this agency in your life. Like, I just feel like I am the designer of my life now. I think it really felt for a long time like life was just happening to me and that there wasn't a lot I could do about it. And now I'm like, no, I am happening to my life. The choices I make are bringing these things into existence. And so I can make different choices if I want something different. But I have to own my agency, and that can be uncomfortable, which is why tolerating discomfort is such an important part of the process.
Yeah. I know I sort of demonized awareness earlier, but to get back to it being one of your traits, why is that? Why is that sort of a trait of emotional fitness? Like, and can someone have too much awareness?
Yeah, self awareness. So I have self awareness as the third trait. So mindfulness is the first one, and it's all about tolerating discomfort. Curiosity is the second one, and it's about kind of lowering your defenses. Realizing you're protecting yourself in ways that might not actually be helpful. And then the third one is self awareness, which is that on the other side of your defenses is all of this information about yourself. A self aware person knows their triggers, they know their biases, they know their strengths, they know their limitations. And when you have that information, you're going to be so much more likely to be productive with it. They've done research that shows that 95% of people say that they are self aware, but only 10 to 15% of people actually are. And the reason why there's such a discrepancy there is you don't know what you don't know. You think you're self-aware because you know everything you know about yourself, and that feels like a lot. You don't know all the things you don't know about yourself. And to me, this was one of the biggest aha moments in therapy, is that I started to realize things about myself. Like, holy shit, I've been living my entire life and I didn't even realize that I'm like unconsciously invested in having this terrible thing happen to me over and over again until I can understand it. And now I see that I can change it, and I can stop moving toward things that are bad for me and start moving toward things that are good for me. And it's just really hard it's again a real trust the process situation, because since you don't know what you don't know, you might not realize how valuable it is, but I promise you every single human being out there has information that they are hiding from themselves or that they can't see, that if they knew, might completely change the course of their life in a really positive way. But self-awareness is scary. We hide things from ourselves for a reason. It's painful to know certain things, and so we work hard not to know them. And so, therapy's not always fun. Emotional fitness isn't always comfortable, but it's worth it. It's worth the work.
Yeah, we just have all have a lot of self-deception, and
Yes.
I heard it phrased like this: where there's someone starting therapy. It's generally hardest at the beginning because you're opening doors in your house that you didn't even know existed, and you're getting in there and you're seeing all these things come out of the closet. I didn't know that door existed. Why is that room there? What's that room over there? Either it's because you're hiding it from yourself or something happened to you or just normal, self-deception. And so I think a level of honesty is extremely important, when it comes to at least recognizing some of the stuff that needs work, doesn't need work, that's really good about ourselves. As athletes, we're fucking the best at telling ourselves that we're horrible and all of this shit needs to be fixed, but we're not very good at, dude, that was like a really good game. Like every player that I coach, they're 17 now, their immediate response after I asked them how the game was, oh, pretty good. Dude, you just threw 7 innings. You gave up one hit. That was like one of the best starts I've ever seen. Yeah, coach, it was pretty good. And then you ask them 24 hours later, and they do some of these reflection exercises that I asked them to do. They're like, yeah, that was sick. That was such a sick game. But like immediate reaction is to always be harsh and critical. I don't know where that
Yeah.
comes from, but it's very interesting.
No, I feel that. Yeah, I think similarly, I don't know if it's the very beginning of therapy that's hard, because I think it takes a little time to start seeing these things, but there is this messy middle where I'd almost compare it to like if you had a closet that was super messy. One of the first things you have to do is kind of just pull everything out of that closet, and there's just going to be shit all around you, and it's going to feel really overwhelming, and you don't know what to do with it, and you're like, why did I start this project? It was fine all crammed in there. And then you sit with it and you start to organize, and you start to realize, oh, I don't actually need a bunch of this stuff anymore. I can get rid of it. And oh, this stuff kind of themes together. I'll put this in a box. I'll put that in a box. And by the end, everything is so much more manageable, and you just feel this kind of weight taken off of you. And that's the same with our emotional life. At first, you learn tough things but can't change them. And that's a really painful part. And then eventually you change them, and it ends up feeling really worth it. But I have people who will quit at that messy part, and just now they're living in a room with shit all around them, and and they're trying to just shove it back into the closet. So
Right.
stick with it. It's a process, but it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Why did you add play as part of your emotional fitness trait?
Yeah, play was the one that surprised me, but now I realize it's so obvious. And when I talk about play, I'm really talking about just a general yes and mentality to other people and to life. I'll use an example because I know sports is your jam. That I read this incredible article about play that defined play as a paradoxical reality where things can be real and not real at the same time. And he gives the example of karate. He's like, when you're fighting in karate, it's not a fake fight, you're not pretending to fight, but it's also not a real fight. You're not actually scared for your life the way you would be if you were attacked on the street. And so you're existing in this kind of playful, real and not real space at the same time where you get to practice something as though it's real. And that is, it expands your skills and your mind and all of these things. And so it's so important to learn to play in life. Brainstorming is a type of play, or taking a joke too far with a friend is a type of play. Just removing constraints and being willing to think big and try things on and really feel them is play. And as adults, we forget how incredibly important it is to do that on a regular basis. And in fact, I read a study in grad school that showed that people who play regularly live longer by a significant number of years than people who don't play regularly. That's how important it is to our well-being. So, yeah, if you want to think of a fun place to start with your emotional fitness, just play a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you mentioned about karate is exactly what professional wrestling is.
Yeah.
And that's why I still have matches to this day, not because I want to make it my full-time job, but because there's no better feeling in the world. Also, I'm like a deep attention seeker, so I can't get a feeling of being in front of an audience that's cheering my name sort of anywhere else.
I'm that way as well.
So, maybe that's also why. Definitely, that's why I did it at the beginning of my life, because I wanted to be rich and famous, and I wanted people to like me. Now that's like probably still there, but less than it was before. But even like right? You're an international speaker, right? You do this like badass, talk, and you're fired up about it. It sort of ends right after that. No one's chanting Dr. Emily throughout the building, right? There's no signs that fucking
Not
come
yet.
up, right? There should be, like, maybe some people are asking for your autograph. I'm sure you take a ton of pictures and stuff and you sign your books or whatever you will, but like, man, just getting out there and in front of an audience and they're just losing their mind. Even if it's like 200 people, it feels like a million, and it's like unexplainable feeling. So that's my attention-seeking behavior, but it is what it is.
I love it. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, I've talked about this too. There's a word in psychology called sublimation, and it's the idea of channeling a societally unacceptable impulse into a societally acceptable behavior. So people who have a lot of anger and take up kickboxing, or, if you're an attention seeker like I am, then doing something like public speaking is great, because instead of grabbing for attention from your friends all the time, you are getting on a stage in front of people who want to hear you speak. So, rather than trying to change ourselves, a lot of what we're trying to do is just channel ourselves and hone the things and direct the things that are working into the right places, and sort of lovingly letting go the things that are not.
Yeah. One more trait that I wanted to discuss was resilience. It's discussed a lot recently, especially around young people. I think they're much more resilient than we give them credit for. I mean, they're dealing with stuff that none of us dealt with, not even me. And I was in high school, not that long ago. I mean, I'm 32, so it wasn't like a zillion years ago. But how do you think about resilience, and maybe how can people train that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to say, I'm pretty sure I've tweeted this before, that we shouldn't tell people to be more resilient if what we mean is that they should suffer more quietly. I think there's a whole lot of people telling kids to shut up and be resilient when it's really more like, don't draw attention to the things that are royally fucked up about our system. So I think we have to be careful about how resilient we're telling people to be. But when I talk about resilience, I think about it as the capacity to bounce forward through setbacks and failures. And I say bounce forward instead of bounce back, because you really never go back to being the person that you were before a hard thing. I'm sure you understand this better than most. And I don't think the goal should be to go back to being who you were. I think it should be about growing and learning from the hard things you've done and moving forward. And, another thing I say is everything doesn't have to be for the best. Like, some things are just shitty, and that's okay. But we can move forward and grow even through the harder things. So resilience is very much about recognizing, learning what are your internal resources, what are your external resources, what do you need in order to move forward through hard things, and how can you use the things you've gone through as a neutral to positive force in your life.
Yeah. I was talking to someone about grief in one of those suicide loss survivor groups, and they mentioned this exact thing. They said, Aaron, you're never going to move on from this thing, and you don't want to, but you will, and you can move forward with it. And I think that for me was like a really good distinction, because I was at the time trying to just move on. Like, I got to move on. Like, I don't know how to do this thing without it. And so, but that's a powerful thing, because and then I realized I don't want to move on, because if I move on, then I forget something that's really, 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 really important to me and has now shaped me into the person that I am today. And so that idea of bouncing forward or moving forward with it as a part of you, I think is quite powerful, especially if you're going through like some really, 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 really hard stuff.
Well, you also mentioned one of my favorite words, which is grief. Resilience, I mean, pretty much the whole chapter of my book on resilience is about how to become better at grieving. We as a society suck at grieving, and it is a really important process. And we only give people permission to grieve if they've lost someone to death. But we should be grieving anytime we lose anything, even things that we never had in the first place. Even just when we're disappointed, we were excited about something and it didn't happen. By letting ourselves grieve, and by that I mean acknowledging the loss, letting yourself feel the loss, maybe having some kind of ceremony or whatever, moment to mark the loss, and then moving forward, we're so much less likely to carry that around with us all the time. And so that's one thing I really encourage people to do, is get better at grieving. Like, I can give an example. I remember I got 2 great opportunities for speaking gigs at the same time, and they were on opposite sides of the country. There was no way I was going to be able to do both of them. And I was really bummed, because I really wanted to do both of them. And I was at dinner with a friend, and I was kind of telling him about it. And I was like, ugh, this is such a champagne problem. Like, I'm so sorry that I'm complaining that I can only do one of my 2 opportunities. And he was like, Emily, like, no, let's take a second. This sucks. Even though you got one thing, you have to say goodbye to the other. And you can feel bummed about that. Why don't you feel sad for the rest of dinner? And then when dessert comes, we'll switch and feel excited about the thing that you choose. And it was just such a relief to have some permission to like acknowledge this thing that was hard and grieve the loss of it. And I felt like I was able to move forward in such a more authentic way because I actually made space for that feeling. So grieve a little more, everyone. I think there's nothing but good things to come of that.
Yeah. Yeah, with that, I do think people have this notion that there's like this hierarchy of levels of suck. And if my level of suck doesn't reach a certain threshold, because there is so many people who are doing way worse than me, then I should just you got to forget about it. You're being sort of a baby. There's people who are doing way worse, who don't have anything that you have. But it's like, that doesn't really work for like you being able to like actually do something in the world that may make a positive change.
Yeah, like there's always going to be someone who has it better than you, and there's always going to be someone who has it worse than you. And one thing I think about too is that sadness, whether it's caused by a horrific trauma or a big inconvenience, that's the same chemicals being released in your body. You feel the same thing. Yeah, it might be in different amounts, or it might be harder to move past it or whatever, but it's still sadness, and it's still worthy of your acknowledgement, And so rather than, if we were only allowed to feel something if it was the worst thing that had ever happened, then there'd be exactly one person who was allowed to feel anything at any given moment. And that's just not how things work. So yeah, give yourself permission to feel.
Well, Dr. Emily, you're a fucking rock star. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Is there
you're a gem.
Is there anything that I did not ask you or didn't mention that you want to just address before we jet off into the sunset?
Well, I think I might turn it back on you, and I would ask, of the 7 traits, which do you think is your biggest strength, and which would you say is your biggest area of growth?
Curiosity is definitely my biggest strength. That's why I do this podcast. Super curious, very interested. Communication, resilience, play, mindfulness. I mean, I would probably say self-awareness. Just because
you saying that means you're more self-aware than most, but go on.
Well, I've got a bit of self-awareness. Like I understand some stuff about myself, but there's definitely things that I've probably just ignored or closed the door on, just like anything else. I'd say I'm pretty empathetic. I definitely more since I lost someone that I love. Before that, I would say I wasn't very empathetic. I didn't really care about anyone but myself or my sports goals. Communication has gotten way better since I've been in a romantic relationship because you just have to be able to express yourself. And writing vows was really, really challenging and really easy at the same time, because I put a lot of pressure on myself because I express myself on this podcast a lot. But I was like, I have to like write them down now. Should I like talk them out and then have someone transcribe it? Anyway, so I'm pretty good at that. I play all the time. That's fucking sweet. Maybe mindfulness. I haven't. Like I have a sort of a meditative prayer practice that I do in the morning, but maybe that's something that I could revisit a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I think I just went through all of them just to talk about
that's
myself.
A solid
But
rundown.
yeah.
I love that. Well, I guess I'd also tell people, if you want more of this, if you want to learn about emotional fitness, grab a copy of my book. It's called Flex Your Feelings, Train Your Brain to Develop the 7 Traits of Emotional Fitness. And you can find me on social. My handle on all the things is at Dr. Emily Anhalt. And Aaron, you're such a joy to have a conversation with. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Anytime. All of that will be linked below. So follow her on Twitter. That's where at X, or I don't even know what to call it anymore. But and link for the book is there also. So cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Take care.
Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.